Hello, everyone, and thanks again for attending. Definitely excited to have you all here to talk about driving retention with a data-informed culture. It's definitely an exciting webinar for us because we have a special guest from QuizUp that we'll introduce shortly, and she's done a great job of doing this at her company, and really excited to share examples of that, and hopefully everyone here can learn and take that with them to their companies as well. In terms of presenters, so myself, like I said, my name is Justin Bauer. I'm the head of product here at Amplitude. And a quick bit on me, I've been focused for most of my career on the analytics industry and have had the pleasure of working with some of the brightest people in that space, including our second presenter, Stefania from QuizUp. Stefania, can you introduce yourself?
I can. Hi. I am Stefania, and I'm from QuizUp, like Justin has already said. I've been head of data science at QuizUp since we launched in 2013, with a sort of brief break in that while I went for a 6-month trip to New York, where we were opening up a sales office for our business-to-business products. So I have been focusing on building up the data-driven culture at QuizUp for 2.5 years now. Before QuizUp, I was focusing on genetics, actually. So this was a major change for me, going into the gaming industry and the app industry. But I had been looking over at the QuizUp data for a while, really excited. So when I got the offer to join, I was happy to do that and shift over to thinking about game retention and lifetime value of users and stuff like that.
Great. So we'll do quick housekeeping here. So the webinar is being recorded, and we will be emailing that out to everyone. If you have questions, please ask us during the questions box. We've reserved time at the end to go through that. And I know that's one of the most exciting times because we actually get to answer specific questions that you guys have. In addition to that, we highly encourage people to get social here. So you can tweet us using the hashtag DataInformed, as well as at Amplitude Mobile, Stefania, which is at StefaniaBJE, or myself at Justin J. Bauer. Today's agenda, we just finished the introductions. Next, we'll do a quick bit on basically what does QuizUp do to make sure that everyone here is aware of that. And then dive into basically the main topic, which is why is data critical to QuizUp, and how has QuizUp created a data-informed culture, and really talk about how having that data-informed culture has really enabled QuizUp to succeed by understanding its users and allowing it to improve its retention. And then we will finish off by talking about kind of what is the importance of retention, and then finally, as I mentioned, dive into the Q&A.
Yeah.
Great. So to start, Stefania, if you could tell us a bit about QuizUp, a little bit about the company, where you're located, and the product, that'd be great.
Absolutely, happy to. Yes, so we are a trivia game, and a social network. So you can sort of compete with your friends or a random person in the world in a topic of your choice. We have a lot of topics, thousands and thousands of topics. You can create your own topic even and share that with the rest of the world. We actually had people meet and get married through QuizUp. So for a while, our vision has been connecting people through shared interests. Yeah, we launched in November 2013 and reached 1 million users in 1 week. That was the fastest growing app to date at that point. I don't know if that record has been beaten, but that was a major growth point, and that was when I was actually called on board to join and analyze all these things. So we immediately went from data, at the qualitative size to needing to do some quantitative research, and the need was great for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely remember that launch and being excited to try out the game. And I think one of the things that is most impressive is obviously getting to 1 million users that quickly, but the fact that you've been able to scale that to 40 million with only 40 employees, I think really speaks to the power of using data, right? You have to be smart. You have to be focused on putting your resources and energy in the right places to be able to sustain that kind of growth.
Absolutely. And it's also worth mentioning there because we're talking about how large we've become in our user base, that growth is it's almost completely organic, because that's the nature of QuizUp. It's people sort of share their interest in QuizUp with their friends, and when we do some qualitative research on like why did you join QuizUp, we see like over 70% of that is because a person, like in the real physical world, asked someone to download QuizUp. So that's pretty cool.
Yes, for sure. So we've touched a bit on it, but I'd love to hear more about why data is critical to QuizUp.
Yes, that's a great question. Why is data critical? I mean, that's how you can make informed decisions about product changes. I guess one of the largest product changes that we did was when we launched QuizUp 2.0 in May 2015. Then we had been live with QuizUp for 1.5 years, and developing QuizUp 2.0 took something like 9 months, and we had seen that just the retention difference between people that used the social aspects of QuizUp 1.0, it was major. So like the people that were social within the app, they were just so much more dedicated. So we decided, like based on data, to just completely, I guess, revamp the app and emphasize the social parts of it. And we did that, and it worked out super well. We increased our retention a lot by doing that, listening to our data.
That's great. Yeah, that's I think an excellent example of taking advantage of data that the insights that you can gather from data and really driving that into your product. And you'd mentioned that went over a 9-month period. I'd love to hear a bit more about kind of during that period how you further validated that was the right direction. Were there any tests that you ran or other ways that you kind of confirmed that was the right path to take?
Yeah, we did a lot of analysis on the social aspects during that period in time, just to confirm because I mean it was a major rewrite of the app. It was just completely renovated, so to speak, and we continued to do some analytics. And during the development period, we also had an open beta group. So we had the things that we were developing, we had them tracked. So early on, while we were developing the QuizUp 2.0 app, we started immediately adding some events, tracking what we were doing, and looking at how the beta group were using it. Obviously, that isn't as quickly statistically significant as when we push stuff out to our entire user base, but we did make some decisions based on the beta usage, absolutely. And I mean, like I said, it was a 9-month period of development, and we ended up shipping with not everything that we started out with, absolutely, because of the beta. Thanks to the beta, I guess, and the data, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, when making those big investments, it's great to be able to make sure you're learning along the way, and it sounds like you guys were. And I think that is a main driver of why it was such a successful launch. So now we'd like to kick off the second poll here, and then obviously we'll continue on with the discussion. But this poll is on what analytics tools people here are currently using. So we'll get that going. And then while that's being filled out, You know, Stefania, I know that you know, we've talked about obviously a data-informed culture being really critical, enabled you to get out a major revamp right, of your product within 9 months. And that's something that I've really been impressed with at QuizUp, is your ability to create that. I'd love to hear a bit more about kind of how you accomplished that and what that looked like.
Yeah, that 9 month period was actually very, I would say, we learned a lot during that period in sort of our processes regarding the data-informed culture. And that was, this was actually a great opportunity for the data team, this revamp, because we, the analytics that we had in the 1.0 app, it was sort of, it was designed in a sort of quick way before we actually released the app, and then we had a few opportunities to add a few data points and stuff like that. But during the rewrite, the data team sort of developed into a growth team where we tested out some A/B testing tools, and we tested out our push notification tools. So we sort of used the 1.0 app during that period as a testing mechanism for a lot of things. But we also, during that period, completely sort of revamped how we design our tracking, because we had this new app and we already had, I think we were 6 people in the data team at that point, and we went through each and every page of the app, of the design by our head of design, and sort of like decided, like, okay, this page, what is the goal of this page? Why is it here? How will we know whether this page is going to be successful? And that is sort of how we decided on what we would track in the 2.0 app. And because we were just saying that earlier, like that the 9 months without shipping a product is that's not a good procedure, and we haven't gone to that. We haven't gone there again. After we shipped in May 2015, we've been sort of just gradually developing, and it's a great way to develop. We ship every 2 weeks approximately. Yeah. So what we learned from this 9 month period was this processes of how we design our tracking, and we've used that since a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think it, you know, laying that foundation to now enable you to ensure that you can quickly iterate and learn and build off of that product. But it sounds like that, you know, the investments that you made there really paid off. So I think we've closed the poll on the poll question. So let's see if we can pull that up. Looks like there we got the results there. So glad to hear that. Looks like almost the majority of people here use Amplitude to understand their retention. It's always good to see that. Quite a few people also use Google Analytics, which we expected to see, and then obviously Mixpanel, and then other. And that's one of the things that we see a lot of, is there are a lot of different ways, a lot of different tools that people use to track their retention, and certainly there's not only one, but multiple ones that can work in conjunction. I think we definitely have confirmed that. So, Stefania, you've talked about kind of the time that it took. You know, you made a big investment over, you know, a 9 month period to really kind of lay that foundation. You know, when we were chatting earlier, you talked about how, like, that obviously really started even before then in terms of thinking about the changes that you need to make from going from a company that launched and immediately hit 1 million users to the scale that you're at now. Love to put up kind of the timeline slide and have you kind of walk through what that looked like over the past almost 3 years.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, so we launched there November 2013, and then we had Mixpanel. We were using Mixpanel at that point. We felt a great need for more access to raw data analysis. I mean, you can do a lot of things in UIs, and with the formats that you create that are specifically designed to be able to analyze them in the UIs, but so we wanted to go deeper. So we had actually started working on our own sort of Redshift pipeline. So sending all of our event data directly into Redshift and being able to access it there. And for those who don't know that, Redshift is an Amazon Web Service project or a product which is like an SQL-based query format over distributed computing. So it's like it's a fairly powerful tool, and it's one of the great things that Amplitude does. I mean, absolutely, having access to a pipeline like that without having to maintain it was just a major selling point for us to start using Amplitude. And so when we found that out of the box, that you have this great UI to analyze all the things, and it was fairly beautiful also. We were always impressed by how nice it was, how nice it felt digging in there. And then being able to dig into our raw data in Redshift without having to have an engineer full-time managing a pipeline, because it is a lot of effort to do that. And we have had experience with that before that. We tried 2 different solutions that didn't work out before that. So I mean, we just started sending our data into Amplitude and started doing a lot of Redshift raw data analysis, and had reached that point in November 2013. And you can see that timeline there in August and November. August was approximately when we started working on the 2.0 product, or maybe July, something like that. So at that point, most of our mobile developers had sort of migrated away from developing anything within the 1.0 app, and were just creating this new product. So during that point, I think I had 4 or 5 mobile developers with me in a growth team, and we were just experimenting with a lot of things. For example, adding Amplitude and push notification services, and creating our homemade A/B testing solution. And that essentially works in a way that so we allocate users into A/B testing groups with our algorithm, and we send that data into Amplitude. So we're able to analyze our A/B results within Amplitude, even though Amplitude doesn't have a specific A/B testing solution. So, and then in May 2015, sorry, we released 2.0, and we had at that point created, or earlier actually, we created our own or also internal dashboard, but we've also been using a lot of the Amplitude dashboards as well if we need to quickly throw up a dashboard. And we also maintain a lot of sort of aggregate views and tables in Redshift that allows us to, like, the things that we cannot do within the Amplitude UI but like to do regularly, we maintain our own tables for that in Redshift with the data that Amplitude sends into Redshift. So it was just a major breakthrough for us to have that pipeline and have access to all of this. And then just after we released 2.0, we started very religiously narrating all of our KPIs weekly, just like every week, yeah, sending it to the company and the board of directors and stuff like that. And at that point also, in May and after May, after the 2.0 release, we were able to, like I was saying earlier, sort of gradually develop QuizUp. And so we started doing those purpose meetings, which are labeled there for July. So every time we have a project, a feature change or whatever, we have these so-called purpose meetings, which I could go into later if we'd like that. So yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it, like I said, it speaks to the fact that there's a lot of work, but the investment really pays off in actually doing that. I think one of the things that I'm really glad that you spoke to is, you talked about in June sending weekly emails, right, out to key executives and others, and I think that's something that we hear a lot about from other companies we work with as well, which is how do you get the data from the person who's actually doing the query, right, to the decision makers, and ultimately, an expectation that they're going to come in and use a analytics tool is, that's not realistic. And so if you can actually get that data in front of them in the most seamless manner, then it makes it much easier for everyone to start talking about those KPIs and start being aligned around what decisions need to be made to improve them.
Absolutely, yeah. And that goes for smaller reports as well. Like I was saying, just all the feature changes. A part of building our data-informed culture has been making sure that anytime we have any project ahead, we need to define our goals. We just have to define our goals, because if we don't do that, we have no way of measuring our success. And it's sort of like also when we talk about our goals and setting the goals for the smaller projects, and we have a sit down with everyone to talk about the goal of the project, it makes sure sort of that we are aligned with our high level goals, with our KPIs sort of. And it ensures sort of agreement about why we're working on the given project. And it's just having clear goals helps everyone prioritize what they should be working on as well. So that's just an important part here. And so then documenting how the goal went in the end, like after we actually release what we released. We have to follow up with that, because that makes it easier to sort of how do I say this? Just to make everyone understand why it's valuable to track the things that we need to track. It's because we follow up with how our goals go, sort of. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. I think we put up, the next slide, which is all around kind of the 6 things that that you'd identified as important ways that you created a data-informed culture. And I love that you've talked about how, first and foremost, defining your goals and making sure that your metrics line up with that, so that everyone knows the reason why they're doing what they're doing. And to your point, that reinforces the reason why you're, taking the extra time to ensure that you're tracking the right things, because they understand that this is a critical part of showing and measuring if you're actually being successful, which ultimately leads to the goals that you've defined. So I think that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the really important things there is just when we are actually defining the measurable success, which is there on the slide, it's so easy to just want to measure everything, and I have seen that both in myself and with everyone that we're working with. When we want to shape a new feature, we're like, okay, yeah, and we have to track how many people do this and how many people do that. But the thing is that when we have our goals in front of us, it's so much easier to actually focus on the metrics that help us measure the success of those exact goals. And being able to filter out those correct metrics, that really helps us sort of rank and prioritize the importance of which data gathering is important, and sort of what the developers should focus their time on. And after we design each metric, or like brainstorm for a metric, we really ask ourselves, like, okay, but will this metric help us know how successful we are, or is it going to be noise? Do we have to gather this data, or don't we maybe? And sort of we continue to define the metrics until we're sure that we are capable of measuring how successful we are towards our goal.
Yeah.
And then we sort of, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, couldn't reiterate the value of that more. It really doesn't even matter what analytics tool you're using if you're not being smart around understanding why you're building what you're building, what metrics are going to be, you're going to measure the success of that by, and then ensuring that you're tracking those correctly. And so, I'd love to hear more, a lot of times we hear companies saying, well, that takes a lot of time, we need to move quickly, and it sounds like that was something that you were able to combat and demonstrate the importance of. What did that look like at QuizUp?
Yeah, those were definitely just the purpose meetings, and the follow-up with it. So it's amazing the value of what we have now started calling purpose meetings, and I'm just gonna continue with that phrase and assume that you understand what I'm referring to. Where it's like a sit down. It's where we take all the stakeholders of the project. It's going to be a data person usually. It's going to be the mobile developer and the server developers working on the project. It's going to be the product manager. And we are going to sort of define what the project is. And we look at it and we're like, okay, what are we going to do? We're going to release a single player mode. Okay, what's the goal of that? It's going to be this and that. And just talking about that goal is going to help everyone understand why we're doing the product and make them sort of feel more ownership of it. And then also it will surface if we don't have the same goals. It's sort of like it reveals someone is like, oh, it's because it's a great game mode, but someone else is going to be like, oh, it's a good way to monetize people, you know. So that's a good place to sort of sync the goals and realize why the hell we're changing our product. Yeah, so talking about that just is a major clarification in itself. And then we start talking about like how will we measure that success. And this sit down is usually something like 30 minutes depending on the size of the project. And we try to slice it up. So we do like a high level one, and then for each individual section or slice of that, we will do another purpose meeting usually. And like this sit down, it so commonly reveals that we have some edge cases in the project, like what should the user be able to do when this happens, and so it's not only a great place to define the goals and the metrics and like any changes that we need to make to data gathering, it's also just a great way to sync everyone involved about what the project actually is. And it creates sort of like excitement among everyone. Everyone's like really clear, like, okay, yeah, this is what I'm going to do, and this is what the results are going to be. So that creates sort of the ownership of, oh, I really care about us delivering good data about that section, because otherwise I won't be able to know that how successful we were, sort of.
Yeah. I mean, if there was one takeaway, I think for everyone here, I would say that it sounds like this purpose meeting is something that was really critical for you, enabling you to include all the stakeholders and understanding what the goals were and really drive the ownership of the metrics. And so something I'd highly encourage other people to do as well. And then the last two here, I'd love to hear more about when you say, you know, narrating your data, what does that mean to you, and how does that enable success at QuizUp?
It means that, just like I was saying about the KPI report, or sort of like that also includes that. It's, you know, if you take the time to narrate your data, you need to take the time to explain what says there. You have to explain the chart, like what does it say? And just taking the time to explain something, even if it's clear to you before, it actually deepens your understanding. We all know this, like from when we're teaching in university a little bit maybe, or something. Like, it's amazing how much your knowledge increases when you're trying to tell someone else about something. And so I think that is one of the great values of narrating your data. So take time every week to narrate your KPIs. Like the value of the data increases by, I would say, like 300% or something when someone tells you what they're looking at, you know. And also when you start to try to explain why something is happening, I feel for myself that it raises questions. I'm like, why is this there? Why did this happen? And then I'll start looking into that. And if I don't figure out how to ask that question, then somebody else will. So, and I think usually when you have like statements about what you're looking at, it will raise you more questions than when people just look at the chart, because don't narrate the chart or the results, then people, they're not as willing to think that they understand it, what says there. So yeah, the value of narrating is just creating global understanding within the company. And so what we do is we take something like one afternoon every week to look at our KPIs. And like not the entire company, but one person will do that for an afternoon, gathering all the KPIs and writing about them and digging deeper into why a certain change is there. And sometimes something comes out of it, sometimes it doesn't, but at least we're really aware of what's going on. And the same thing happens for like probably a week after a feature has been out, after a change, after something that we did a purpose meeting about has been out. We take the data and we look at it and we look at the results and we write a report and we send it to the company. And sort of, yeah. I think did that answer? What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that's great, and I think that reinforces kind of closing that feedback loop. At the beginning, you have the purpose meeting to really set the objectives, but then making sure that you actually, after you've launched it, actually look to see, did you accomplish those objectives? And having one person kind of be the owner of that and narrating that for the company to make seems like something that's worked really well for QuizUp. And then,
yeah.
and then on the last point here, I assume that a big part. I mean, you only have, you said, like approximately 40 employees, and so you can't be dedicating all of your time to data analysis. I'd love to hear more about how you kind of automated this and made it an efficient process for you to make sure that you can continue to make the right decisions.
Mm-hmm. I mean, things like calculating the significance of an A/B test or something. There are just so many things that you can automate. And for example, the things that, I mean, we track a lot of the things, like we track a lot of events and their properties. So we can dig deeper into them within the Amplitude UI. As soon as it becomes something like some other calculations, like I need to export this file and export this file, and then this third file, and I need the sum of those and divide it by this. And it's not necessarily anything complicated, but as soon as you have to do that, you can save like 15 minutes every, I don't know, a day or 3 times a day or whatever. If you just write a script to exactly do that and then generate a chart, and then you only have to look at what it says, and then you can just take time to deep dive into that. And like I was saying also earlier about the things that we want to analyze from our raw data, instead of sort of always querying what we want to check up on and waiting for an hour for a query to finish. We have cron jobs running that update tables for us and stuff like that. So just a quicker access to a lot of the data that you need. So just figure out the things, the tasks that you have to do repeatedly, and try to find a way to automate those tasks. Get some support from an engineer if you're not a programmer. Or so essentially that. There's just a major automation culture here at QuizUp. So everything that we can, we try to automate so that we can spend our time on the things that computers can't do for us, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I completely agree with that, and I think obviously there's a fair amount of work that's involved in that. I'd love to hear a bit more about kind of what some of the key challenges that you've seen in creating a data-informed culture and how you basically addressed those challenges.
Yeah. Well, I mean, definitely that mindset change that I was talking about earlier, getting people to consider data as part of the feature, that was a major challenge. I mean, we've now been live for 2.5 years, and I think most of the people that I work with are now there. Definitely, they care about they care about why we should change stuff. but it's easy to forget it. And so we one of the things that I do is just ask a lot of questions, like why do we want to do that? Instead of always answering, instead of always telling people, are we sure we want to do that because the data looks like this? I tend to ask maybe instead, like, what is the reason for that change? Have you looked into this? And like, do you have any data about this? Even though I know the answers, that we have some data about it, I'd sort of like to start with just raising the subject and saying like, yeah, like what, yeah, definitely. But I mean, it is really hard to get people to sort of prioritize gathering the data when we just need to crunch to get stuff out. It can be tricky, but these purpose meetings, they have really helped with that mindset, just creating the value beforehand of like why it will be valuable to have data about this feature, essentially. And it doesn't take too much time. And one thing that I didn't mention earlier about the purpose meetings, but it's really important that the developers are there, because what their role is, besides just being there and like become owners of the project and all that, they have to shout out if they see that gathering some data is going to be unnecessarily challenging, because it's easy for us to sort of think about a metric that will be really nice to have, but the developers sort of know the code base, and they should be there and say like, oh, that's going to take like 2 days to gather that data, or like to implement that tracking. And usually that just doesn't make sense, and we can usually answer questions in an easier manner just if we brainstorm a little bit about it.
Yeah, really making that a cross-functional decision, because ultimately, yeah, it is going to be the engineer that has to implement it, and if they're not bought in and you don't have an opportunity to hear from them, then you may tell them to do something that isn't worth their time. Yeah. You might have been able to come up with a different solution.
Yeah, definitely. And so having the developers there to say what's an easy way to track things is really valuable. And obviously, like, they might figure out along the way that it wasn't easy, so then we just have another brief meeting and we're like, oh, but can we change this metric to something else? And I mean, there are commonly small nuances that we see in like the code logic that we need because we want to track some information, but we prefer not to have the business logic of the app just evolve around tracking. Like that sounds a little bit backwards. So we try to do that. Yeah, definitely. And then
that makes sense. And then you also had mentioned, issues around data tracking. Those kind of things happen. How do you mitigate concerns when those arise?
Oh yeah, I mean that's just okay. Even though we have now we now have all these systems in place to try to prevent the data tracking errors, they still happen. And so I would say that first point in this current slide is definitely the major part. There is the purpose meeting, definitely. And then we have the third part in this slide, which is what we have developed is like we sync all our data formats programmatically between platforms. So we keep them all on GitHub. And so the Android and iOS client developers can just read the exact format from there, and we all have like or both of the platforms have like a library that exports the data format and makes sure it's in sync between the clients. But despite that, those things, we still see some tracking errors, and it can be like really overwhelming when you're like you're trying to understand something. You're trying to understand like a result of a feature, and you're like, what is going on? Why does this look so weird? And you have to sort of to understand what's going on. It's like debugging 3 layers of code, essentially. It's like the bug could be on like amplitude side, mostly probably isn't, It could be like in the UI of the Amplitude side. It could be somewhere in like the data processing side of Amplitude. But most likely it's going to be like a data tracking bug on our side. And it's just tough to figure those out. And you have to sort of find a time from a developer to try to understand stuff. But I found it to be really valuable to try to understand those weird things as soon as possible, because if we don't explain weird data things as soon as we find them, they are always going to be like a source of doubt for all information that we find. So if we see something negative about a feature, we're going to be like, oh, but isn't it just because of that data tracking bug? So we sort of have to eliminate things like that as soon as we can, I guess.
Yep, that completely makes sense. I think we want to get the next poll question up, which is asking everyone what are some of their short-term company goals. While that's going, I think one of the things that this has really reinforced for me, Stefania, is that you guys you take this really seriously, and something that we hear from, like I mentioned before, from a lot of small companies is we just don't have the time to do this. We have so many things going on, but what I'm hearing is that you actually can move faster and be more efficient as a company because of this, because of the investments you made. That actually enables you to, even at what I would say a relatively small size, given how large your user base is, to be able, you couldn't be that efficient if you hadn't actually made these investments. And so I think that's something that's like pretty clear, and it's really great to hear how much time you guys have invested in this and the results that you've seen because of it.
Yeah, I think that's just well phrased, and I think you're right. I mean, we definitely move faster because we do things, we try to optimize between, like, we want to track the things, but we don't want to make it so complex that it slows down the feature or the feature development. So we just try to make like when we design our tracking, we do that with an impact effort scale, just like with all other features. Like when we're trying to decide what we're going to do next, we do like sort of an impact effort scale. So where we take everything that all of our ideas, and like the x-axis is going to be the effort, and the y-axis is going to be the impact. And we sort of order the things, like the metrics and the features that we want to work on. We order them on the impact effort scale, and we try to do the things that are going to be low effort, high impact. And we do that with metrics as well, and that's just, it's super helpful and gets us really far. Yeah, definitely helps us make decisions, and definitely.
That's great. Yeah, having that structure in the same way you would around feature development, having that around the metrics you use makes a ton of sense and keeps that efficiency high. So I think we've closed the poll. Let's see if we can take a look at the results. And it looks like a overwhelming majority of people here really want to understand kind of user behavior that leads to retention, which is great. And it looks like other people also interested in increasing conversions as well. And obviously these are two things that QuizUp has done a spectacular job of. I'd love to hear a bit more from you, Stefania. Like, why is it that you focus so much on retention at QuizUp?
Yeah, I mean, obviously good retention means better lifetime value of user. It means like a slower drain of the market, so to speak. I mean, we have good retention, and so like a large proportion of our user base is actually dedicated users that have been with us for a really long time. And those users help us make the app better. I mean, we take advice from those users when we have to make decisions about like what to do next and all that. I mean, essentially it means that, yeah, it takes a longer time to drain the market, I guess. And it's fun. It's great. It's great to stay for a very long time with people.
That's great. That makes a ton of sense. And something that I know that we preach here at Amplitude a lot is not just using kind of the default definitions of retention, but really customizing it to your business. How does QuizUp track user retention?
Yeah, for a really long time we used signing up as the sort of the born step in retention, and playing a game as the return step. And that was sort of our go-to metric for the 1.0 app. But after we released 2.0, where we emphasized the social features so highly, and I guess I think it might be useful to just say that now. I mean, we were looking at the game like the retention of people that did social things, like the retention from being born by signing up and returning by just opening the app or playing a game or doing whatever. And when we look at the users that did any social features early on, they retained so much better, and that was one of the primary reasons why we needed and wanted to create 2.0, where we saw this major where we did this major social network increase, I guess. Does that make sense, what I just said?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the retention metrics that we look at are sort of being born is usually our so-called sign-up event, because our app is based on creating user accounts. And then the return metrics they vary. I mean, we have like an app open, but preferably for like the app is open for a while, for a few seconds at least. So it's not just for, removing the red notification bubble or something, or accidentally tapping the app or on the home screen. And then we also work with returning to play a game and returning to do a social event, like posting or commenting or liking or scrolling down a feed or something like that. What we also look at a lot right now and fairly recently is that we've been looking at recurring game-to-game retention. And what I find tricky about that retention is actually that it's less intuitive, because you can be a part of a born cohort and a return cohort at the same time. So it's like it's a little unintuitive to look at that retention. So I would say for my first 2 years in the gaming industry, I was a little bit annoyed with the definition of recurring retention, but I've come to peace with it, so to speak, and we use it a lot now. And for example, when we are measuring the impact of ads within the app, we use the recurring game-to-game retention. So like being born by playing a game and returning by playing a game. So I don't know if I should go into details about what recurring retention means here. What do you think, Justin?
Well, I think what you've said so far has been super helpful. I do want to be cognizant of time. We actually have quite a few questions that have come in, which is great. Sounds like people are really excited about learning more. But what I'd love to do is get to the section on the questions. While we're doing that, we have a final poll. So we'll get that final poll up. And then while people are filling out that poll, we'll dive into the Q&A. So the first question we have here is, people would love to hear a bit more about kind of the impact that push has on retention at QuizUp.
Yeah, okay. So I'm gonna read the question. So yeah, so how do we use push notifications, I guess? Yeah. There's actually one thing that I would love to add to the retention part before I continue to that question.
Yeah.
And it's related to Amplitude's cohorts, because that's been sort of like what we do a lot with our retention is that we compare these couple of different types of retention, like sign up to open the app, or sign up to playing a game, or sign up to doing anything social, or recurring social behavior, or recurring game behavior, or something like that. And we compare it to like between different cohorts. So we create like cohorts of people that have posted more than 5 times in QuizUp, or cohort of users that have commented more than 2 times, or whatever, something like that. And then we compare it with the opposite of that group, and that's how we sort of understand the different the retention difference between 2 cohorts or 2 user groups. So I just wanted to specifically mention that, like, the Amplitude's cohorts were a game changer for us, also because it allowed us to we can do analysis like this without having to have a data scientist involved. So we have product managers and our head of community. They are doing stuff like this. They are doing a lot of deep diving into like retention differences by some behaviors within the Amplitude UI. So that's really helpful. And so then, regarding the push notification retention, we have a few push notification types just naturally within QuizUp. It's when people follow you, it's when people challenge you in a game, and stuff like that. And I think it's important. Push notifications, it's really important for us. And what we did there was, for example, we created a cohort of people that had push notifications on versus a cohort of people that did not have push notifications on. And there was just a major lift with the user, like retention lift with the users that had them on. And I think that's just obvious. I mean, when you get a feedback from your friends that they're following you or they're challenging you, that brings you back to the game. So that's a very high impact for us. Do you think that answered the question, Justin?
Yeah, no, I think that makes a ton of sense, and I think it is an important component of any retention strategy to do that. The next question here is around, as you're kind of creating a data-informed culture, how many people at QuizUp actually use Amplitude to understand user behavior?
Yeah, I mean, throughout time, we've had something like 10 or 11 people completely dedicated to data science. Right now, we don't have that much. Like, we've had a rotation of that, but everyone, or mostly everyone within the company, has access to Amplitude, and it's like a requirement of us. Like, you should be asking questions about QuizUp, and you should. If you have a gut feeling, you should support it with data, and you should dig around to find your answers. And I sort of approach it like that, saying about teaching a man to fish. So, like, the first time you ask me something, I will tell you the result, and I will give you a link to Amplitude where you can see it. The second time, I just tell you exactly what to do in Amplitude without giving you the link. And the third time, I just say, go to Amplitude. Almost. But of course, I mean, like, obviously, I just want to help people as much as I can to be able to be completely self-sufficient in answering questions about anything. And this is really important to us. This is a huge part of our culture. Look it up.
Yeah, and I think that kind of reinforced what you'd mentioned even earlier on around like how you ask a lot of questions. You might even know the answer to a question, but you want the person who's coming to you to be able to figure it out yourself, right? Teaching them basically how to fish, which ultimately is going to lead to efficiency, right?
Yeah.
I think that's great. I think that's really great. Next question we have is, how do you look at day 1 versus day 7 and day 30 retention, and is one more important than the other?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. I remember when I was starting to look at those retention metrics, when I was just getting to know them, my early gaming days, I hated day 7 and day 30 retention. I just hated them because they're so arbitrary. What are the chances that you return exactly on day 7? I don't know. I think it's probably different for apps that assume that you use the app every day. But I guess maybe for a game, the goal might be something like, we at least want you to use it a few times a week. So what we do a lot is we look at day 1, then week 1, and then like month 1, and 3 and 4. We do that a lot. And then I remember when Amplitude released a feature called bracketed retention, I was really excited about that, where you can define like what is exactly the return period. And I created this view that was sort of week 0 retention without day 0. So it's like, what are the chances that you return on day 1 to day 7? And that's sort of like just the overall probability of you returning again later that week. And I think that's really interesting. But so the importance between like early retention and long-term retention, we look at day 1 retention a lot when we are shipping a new different feature, especially sign up to game or sign up to something else when it's a feature that might majorly impact your want or need to even join the app the next day. But for something deeper, we look at more long-term retention. I guess the issue there is that the iteration loop is slower, so you have to wait longer for results, but we look at that definitely as well.
That's great. That's great. Well, once again, Stefania, really like to thank you for taking the time here. Had a lot of great discussion. I think a lot of actionable insights that people can take with them and use to ultimately increase their retention. Want to remind everyone that we will be sending out basically shortly a link to the webinar, so you can basically listen to this again if you have anything that you need further clarification on, and then we'll be sending out the slides as well. Once again, thank you, Stefania. This has been really great. It's been a pleasure.
You too. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye.
Bye.